We're going to talk about trucks because, of course, as we know, cars like this, electrical vehicles for passengers, are sort of a common sight nowadays, but trucks are lagging behind, and that's, of course, for a good reason, because it's harder. It's not as easy as a small car. They're big, they need big batteries, a lot of power to charge them. So it's obvious that the challenge there is slightly bigger. Tomorrow we're going to speak more about the business model of electrical trucks. Today we're going to look more into the integration of the logistics for trucks. We're going to have a panel with two panelists who will introduce themselves through a short pitch, and the two others will join later for the panel, and I will introduce them more or less myself. Let's quickly start with our first panelist, Markus MILDNER. He's the CEO of eMobility, Siemens.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very happy to be here, and very happy that you are here at that late hour of our conference. And when I thought about how to start my short pitch or my short presentation, I thought about, well, why not giving a real example on how we got here? And therefore I was choosing that guy here, Tobias Wagner. He's actually a professional long-distance electric truck driver. And he's also a YouTuber, so you can see him on a YouTube channel where he actually promotes his experiences with charging infrastructure, but also with the trucks he's driving. And he took our complete equipment from Germany to the fair here. So he was driving, here's some data on the route he was using. Unfortunately, he was not using a Volvo truck, but up to come, hopefully. But he was using a DAF truck here, and you see his charging stops, his charging experience during the way, and also, and that's the important thing, also the emissions avoided for that. So that's a real example on what is happening, on how we brought over our equipment to here to Gothenburg. But that's not enough. It's a nice example, but not enough for scaling. So if you really want to scale, if you look on today's data, probably we have 2.3% of the truck registrations which are electrical. If you really want to scale, you need to overcome different factors. And one factor is probably grid capacity. So most depots for trucks, but also the on-route charging for trucks, they are missing enough grid connection, and that's the one thing. The other thing is we need reliability. So if you think about truck logistics fleets, I mean, they're there to operate in the best case all around the clock, apart from when they're charging, and so that charging part must be very reliable. And thirdly, the total cost of ownership for fleets is very important, and for a truck company, for a logistic company to invest in electric trucks, it's really of utmost importance that there is a business case behind that. So give you 3 examples on each topic. So the first one here, EV Charge from Sweden. They are one of who are expanding in the CPO market, and what they did very well and very intelligent is apart from using, as you can see, chargers from Siemens, but also what they did is they did not have enough grid access, and they were actually adding and connecting battery storage systems to it to overcome the grid capacity. And with that, they came to overcome one of the hurdles I was mentioning. The other one, it's a mining company. They have operations also in Sweden, and they're moving like 300,000 tons of raw material with 99% availability. And for them, really the availability is the key to it. And they're doing it at the moment with 99%, as I was saying, in very harsh conditions. So that these are environments where logistics is not done in ideal conditions, but where logistics is really done under dusty, dirty circumstances. And here the operational reliability of the truck on the one side, but then also of the infrastructure, of the charging infrastructure, is what makes them in that area really successful. And then the last one, if we talk about total cost of ownership, here's an example of Textilia from Denmark. That's a company who has been introducing electrical trucks to their distribution fleet. They lowered their own carbon emission with that, and based on that, they were really winning contracts. So for them and for their customers, it was important that they go all electric, and with that, they increasing their business, and that helps them all over also to improve their business model. So there are 3 examples on companies who have been, according to these 3 limiting factors, overcoming these hurdles. But that will be not enough, and overall, at the end, what we really need is that not only on the hardware side we get the model working, but also on the software side. And one of the examples here is EV, who's really expanding in the network, and they're not only using hardware, but they're also controlling the chargers and the backbone with software. And what they do is here really that they enable their operations with predictive maintenance, so they have steady connection. They're doing dynamic power allocations of their chargers. They're integrating and helping to integrate then also with fleet management systems and the likes also when it goes to depots. And that all, if you talk about hardware and then we talk about software, one of the very critical things at the end is that we make these operations also cyber secure. So chargers and charging infrastructure has to be cyber secure, because we're talking about critical infrastructure, and when we're talking about reliability and availability in the future, that piece of cyber security is of utmost importance. That's also one thing we're pushing very much at Siemens, and we're trying to bring also as an advantage for our customers to the market. So with that, try to illustrate a little bit what it needs, that fleet electrification, truck electrification, and logistic operations can go electric. So it's on the one hand side, the hardware, it's the business model, it's the grid connection, but then it's also software, and then it comes on the layer of cybersecurity on the top. I think with that, if I go back to my initial example of Tobias, who was driving that truck from south of Germany to Gothenburg, that is a company which is a smaller logistic company. It's not a huge one, but it's a company who has set up all these factors. So they were electrifying their trucks. They have now over 20 DC charging points installed. They have included a battery storage system. With that, they overcome the grid connection limits they're having, and they're adding step by step new vehicles to their fleet, and with that also new chargers. And if I look on that, that's probably a small company which is very unique, but it's a good example of a small company who's also overcoming all these 3 limiting factors, and the technology works there. The business case works for them, and now it's up that we're really scaling, that we're smart integrating, and that we're scaling these business models around the industry up, and very happy to discuss that later on with my colleagues here on the panel. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Markus. Next up is HJELMGREN. He's the SVP, that's probably Senior Vice President, I guess, of Product Management at Volvo Trucks. Warm welcome.
Thank you very much, and really great to be here, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy that there are at least a few hardcore participants remaining, and the reason why I am happy to be here is that I think we have an important conversation, and we need to discuss how we together can accelerate the transformation when it comes to transforming the transport industry. Going from today, which is a relatively dirty situation, into the future, which is clean transport. And if there is one theme that I think we will talk about today, it is that it is about collaboration. And today, heavy transport actually stands for roughly 8% of the total CO2 emissions globally. And in my mind, that is a lot. And that means that we need to do a lot of things, and we need to do them now. And here is not the DAF, done, Markus. I saw you had one Volvo picture as well, so well done in Denmark. This truck is an important piece of our products. It's our all-new FH electric long-range truck. We will start to deliver it next year. And we call it the FH Air Electric, and it has fast charging capacity. You can charge it in 30 to 40 minutes, and it has 600 kilometers of electric range. And if I allow myself to brag a little bit about what we have done so far at Volvo Trucks, not saying that we don't have a lot of more things to do, but so far we have been pretty successful because we have electric trucks in commercial operation all across the globe, I would say, more or less. We were quite early out. We started in 2019. And we have so far delivered more than 5,000 electric trucks to customers in 50 different countries. And right now, as we speak, they are actually doing roughly 25 million clean kilometers every month. So that's at least something. We have 8 electric truck models, and by that we can actually electrify city and regional distribution. We can electrify waste management, some construction applications, and step by step, longer and longer applications. And we are also not only investing in trucks and to develop trucks, but also in charging infrastructure. We have, together with others, the MILDNER joint venture, where we are building and going to operate at least 1,700 high-performance charging stations across Europe. And obviously, this infrastructure will be there for all truck brands, all the truck brands that Markus had on his slides, for instance. So, with all this being done then, why is it, like Markus also said, that the fraction of electric trucks that we are actually delivering every year is a small, tiny fraction of the total deliveries, a little bit more than 2% in Europe? And the simple answer, or complex, how you want to phrase it, is that all enabling conditions are not yet in place for the transformation to happen. And that is what we need to change, and we need to do it relatively soon in order to take care of the climate, because we have a climate crisis. And now I'll make one click to show you the second and last slide of this pitch then. So we have a famous equation in the Volvo Group saying that adoption will only happen when all variables in this equation are actually in place. And if any of them are missing, we will remain at the low adoption rate that we have today. So let me briefly talk about these variables, and Markus were actually into some of them already, so I will be quick then. Starting with the products and services. As I said, at Volvo Trucks, we are investing a lot in new products, in new services. We have a broad offer today. We will have an even broader offer tomorrow. And our customers can already today perform many of their normal operations electrically. And then when they have made a shift, they normally say to us that they will never go back again. So it's just to make the shift and they will stay there. Then the second item is very important, and that is what we call total cost of ownership. Because obviously most of our customers are doing things that means that they can continue to make money. It is about making money. They need to be profitable. And in the early stages of the transformation, there is a certain need for help to make sure that the transformation happens. Help can be in terms of policies, help can be in terms of incentives, but somebody needs to change the equation a little bit to help them to make the profitable transformation. And then, of course, infrastructure. We talked about that ever so briefly. There is a need to use the grid better, the one that we have. There is a need to invest in more grids. There is a need to get better stability, more predictability, and of course more charge points. Obviously, that is the case. And fossil-free energy is the foundation for all clean transformation. The heavy transport industry is a very small part of that, but we also need more clean energy, of course. And then we need a supply network that is robust and that we can rely on and that can cater for the new transport systems that we are building. So the simple summary is that all these variables, they will together determine the speed of transformation. And this transformation is not something that just one single party can do. It's not only about making good trucks, it's not only about making good charging infrastructure, it's about how we collaborate together that will make the difference. And at least we believe in Volvo Trucks that now is the time to accelerate, and we want to work more in partnerships because we know that that is the only way to succeed. So with that said, I would like to say thank you, and let's go into discussion.
Thank you. Jan, have a seat. I'd like to ask Markus as well to take a seat, and I'd like to introduce Delphine Bovier and Jasna Tomic to the stage. Give those two newcomers a round of applause. Yeah, so first, Jan, I was curious, who is now already buying those trucks? What kind of companies?
Yeah, I would say, even though we have sold more than 5,000 trucks, I would say that most of the customers that have bought trucks, they are the ones that are a little bit more interested in the planet than normally, that are actually having a sustainable...
Idealist companies.
A little bit so. They have a sustainability agenda. They want to show that they can do it. They are interested for real. So it's not... Most of those 5,000 have been very few. I mean, it's like 5,000 customers, more or less, buying one truck each. So it's not that many of them are saying, we buy because we can actually make a profitable business out of it. Then there are very big differences, and maybe we'll come back to that in different countries, in Europe, in US, etc., etc. So,
okay, so we have the trucks, we have the charging infrastructure, and we also have the grid here, the French grid, to be more precise. Delphine, you are the head of innovation on eMobility at Enedis.
Yes.
Can you tell me a bit about that company and what your role is there?
So you said that Enedis is a French distribution system operator in France, and we operate above 95% of French territory, which means around 40 million customers.
So you're almost a monopolist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can say
I
so.
can imagine in this context, it can be an advantage that France is so centralized.
We spoke a few minutes ago about a cooperative approach, and of course it's an advantage to be able to speak to only one grid operator.
Yeah.
And we also can have a deeply discussion also with public authorities in France, because less of stakeholders in a way. So in a way, yes, it's a...
Is that a problem for you? I'm looking at you two, that you have to deal with more than one grid operator in other markets? Or is that not really a problem?
Well, I guess most of our customers who are building up that or using our infrastructure or hardware to build up their operations, I mean, they have their connection point to their distribution grid operator. So I guess for them, it's not a direct problem that there are multiple ones. But when it comes to overall planning of the grid, then you have probably the problem that you have multiple participants, and if you have then the transmission operator, grid operator, and you have the distribution grid operator, they are not synchronized, and there you get the problem then.
Yeah. Delphine, do you have ongoing projects when it comes to electrifying trucks? Are you enabling that already in France?
Yes. In France, we are publishing studies in collaboration with Total Energy, Vinci Autoroute, and 6 major constructors. Last year, we have studied we have conducted a study about highway electrification of highway corridors for trucks. And it was quite interesting to see that the problem will not be really grid capacity, but grid connection, to anticipate grid connection. But the problem is not only a problem of grid connection, it's also a problem of land area, land space in a charging station.
And capacity is not a problem because trucks have a different, let's say, rhythm than passenger cars. They drive at night, for example. So you...
yes.
No. He says no.
Well, yes and no. I mean, they have a different rhythm of driving, but I think what you're mentioning is, if you look on Vinci or Total Energy around the highways, it's the one thing is getting the place where they're charging connected, and if we have, I don't know, 3 megawatt charger there plus 400 kilowatt charger, there's a bunch of energy, but then you need also the space there. So the physical space,
yes.
because you have to park the trucks there for a certain time. Not everybody goes to the megawatt charger. Some are staying there overnight, some are staying there for a few hours. And that physical space also around these highways is a limiting factor at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in Germany you already have these big traffic jams with trucks. Yeah. Jasna, I need to introduce you. Jasna Tomic, you are the vice president of CalStart. Cal stands for California, or?
Yes, when it started some 33 years ago, it was sort of a startup for startup companies in the clean transportation.
Yeah.
Headquartered in California, but now we're actually all throughout the US in a couple of different states at least, and as well as presence in Europe on our global Drive to Zero program.
And what does CalStart do?
CalStart is a non-profit organization, so non-governmental organization, but also membership-based. So we work with our industry partners across the board, with some of the partners right here that are members as well, as well as utilities and startup companies and software companies. Basically, our overall target is just to speed up market adoption of clean transportation solutions, technologies across the board. And our experience is especially high, or we sort of dominate, our work is dominated by the medium heavy duty sector, so bus, transit bus, and heavy duty trucks in particular, because those are businesses, right, that look at their total cost of ownership or their business case in a rational way, rather than the private light-duty market, which is not always all sort of...
Car buyers are irrational.
Sometimes, some of them, right, right.
Yeah. When I think about electrical trucks, I think about the so-called last mile solution, as we call it in the Netherlands. So the truck that does the final bit of distance to your door or wherever, in cities mostly, just like electrical buses. Is that going fast enough? Let's start small. I guess there's still a world to win there as well.
That is one, actually, where we find the total cost of ownership works out today.
Yeah.
So you
So that's an easier convention.
Yes, the Amazon trucks, the FedEx trucks, the UPS, the DHL that come to your door. The total cost of ownership is there for them. And that one is, if you will, I don't want to say finished, but the question is answered.
The long haul.
And where I live and through the US, actually, there's companies like Rivian that have definitely sort of launched their market in that segment.
Yeah.
And that segment, we believe, has been solved. We'd like to do something like that across the other segments of the...
And how important were government rules to make that work? I mean, there were a lot of cities, especially in Europe, I don't know the situation in America, that pushed for environmental zones, and then the model worked. That was important, right?
Good question. The environmental zones work easier in Europe. Europe really leads in that. In US, it's very difficult. We're trying. I think New York just put a sort of carbon charge, and they're still debating whether it's going to be on or off. just because of the different segments, how politics or who has jurisdiction of what. However, what did work is some of the California-led, especially, regulations that were incentivizing or setting regulations for supply-side market adoption, both on the light-duty, frankly, and in the medium-heavy-duty sector, that were demanding certain percentage of, it's called advanced clean trucks.
Yeah.
That's one element. The other element is a LCFS credit market, which is low carbon fuel standard credit market. And then incentives. I think one of the slides that you showed with all the pieces of the puzzle, we are, or at least were, until some changes happened at the federal level last year.
I'm not aware of those, no.
No, I don't think you are. They were at least 10 states that were following those rules. And setting those type of targets is really important, as well as supporting with the state government or federal government, if possible, to incentivize and help the early years.
Yeah.
So that combination, we believe, is quite critical and a good collaboration, actually, to help support the introductions.
Yeah. So is there a need for governments to do more when it comes to making the long-haul electrification more attractive? Is the government doing enough? Are European governments doing enough?
Well, I guess, or you want to first? Or?
No, go ahead.
Don't be polite.
I guess, well, never enough. The one thing what we though need, apart from putting these incentives or also rules for CO2 emissions into place, is stability on what they are doing. So what does not help the industry and all the investors is if you have incentives and
then you don't.
2 years afterwards, you shift back and you go on again. Same on regulations, same on
but this is
low carbon
inherent to politics.
That's really the thing which is at the moment also hurting. And if you look on discussions we're having in the European Union on softening the targets towards 2030 to 2035, that's not really helpful.
Right.
I guess on the passenger side, we will not turn back, so that's on a good way. It's still the question, what was the speed of it? On the truck side, and you were saying that especially these last mile things are also in a lot of legislation countries or zones, they're also in a pretty good way. We see there also a business case. We see also for the cities the impact that by decarbonizing their last mile, they have a direct advantage for the life worthlessness in the cities. Now for the heavy duty or the long haul, long distance thing, we see now initiatives in Europe with these corridors which are built up.
It's the highway corridors that you
one of that, for example, we have that in different countries. The speed of it, though, is rather slow, so there can be more push on it. And it's not only the thing of pushing it quicker through, but also of ensuring that the frame conditions are there, because it doesn't help if I plan a nice depot or the nice charging spot next to the highway, but then I don't get the transformers for it because I did apply too late for a grid connection. And so there can be done surely a little bit more.
Yeah,
I have the same view. I was going to say that I definitely believe that the European countries are not doing enough then, and it's quite easy to say and to prove it, because if you look at the different countries, if one country has an adoption rate close to 10% when it comes to relatively heavy truck, and another country have an adoption rate that is close to 0, and it's exactly the same truck, and it's exactly the same transport missions, something is different, meaning that I think some countries should actually learn from the ones that are doing more than. And I think we saw it in US as well, and you were into it, the opt-in state, and the ACT, or even more importantly, this advanced clean fleet, which I think is important, that if we simplify a bit the setup, the regulated setup today is that the truck OEMs, they have to supply something. We are legally obliged to supply something. In Europe, we have the CO2 emission legislation saying that in 2030 we need to reduce CO2 with 43% of all the things that we sell compared to what we did in 2019. So we need to deliver, but nobody has to buy.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a strange setup. And the ACF, I think, was one part to make sure that somebody actually had to buy as well. And then I think taxation is, of course, always a bit sensitive, especially in some areas. But obviously, the bad choice has to be more expensive in one way or another.
Okay, so you as Volvo, you are obliged to produce a certain amount of electrical trucks, but you don't know who's going to buy it.
Yeah, that's the setup in Europe, and it's basically most likely being the greenhouse gas setup in US as well. Then that the OEMs doesn't have to be battery electric; it can be fuel cell electric or anything else that is good from an environmental point of view. But the OEM have to deliver, and in essence, nobody has to buy it. And that equation certainly needs to change. And it has been changed in some countries. Switzerland is a perfect small European country that is very smart in doing things, and then we see immediately the result.
Okay, so that's tragic. The only country that's not in the EU is actually doing the best.
Yeah, that's true. Let's say Norway is.
Let's be sad about that. Oh yeah, Norway, of course.
Well, they know how to count money well, so
they do.
They understand money. That's true.
I did have a comment, if I may, on your question about long haul.
Yeah.
One thing we've been seeing with the sort of build out of warehouses, distribution centers, at least in the United States, we've been seeing a shift a little bit from long haul to regional haul. Regional haul growing, the long haul dropping a little bit. It won't disappear, especially in a country like US that doesn't have enough rail capacity currently. But I don't think we need to look at the long haul as the only holy grail, right? The regional haul is quite important.
Can you define regional haul for somebody stupid like me?
Sure. Either the trucks that move about, let's say, 200 to 300 kilometers a day, either that deliver around the city or larger metro areas, or from ports to warehouses, from warehouses to stores, etc. There's a lot of movement of trucks that happens there. And that region has been actually kind of increasing in the industrial areas because of this just-in-time delivery that we've been having for more than 10, 15 years, even longer, right? So it's not so much like these long trips necessarily. It's a lot of shorter trips. I think we can make it there very soon. It's like right on the border. So I would emphasize that as something to focus on.
That's a big market share of the total.
Absolutely.
In France, for example, it's 80% of the market of the freight. It's regional transport. So
so that's a big win.
I agree that the electrification of depot and warehouse is ongoing.
Yes.
And but it's not that easy to understand. There are many charging patterns. So for us as a grid company, it's not that easy to really understand what will be the need of a grid connection, because it will depend on the organization of electric charging, whether it is at depot, at warehouse, or on the way. So it's not that easy, but it's ongoing.
You all speak about the need of cooperation, of better collaboration. From each of your own point of view, what is not going well in that respect right now? If I can start with you, what can be done better? Because it's such an obvious thing to say. I mean, we need to collaborate, of course. We need to collaborate. But I want to identify why apparently the collaboration is not good enough right now, or what's missing? What's the bottleneck?
I don't know if collaboration is not good enough. In France, we have ongoing discussion with the public authority on highway road electrification, and it gathers all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
And and it is, we are at the stage, there will be new contracts with highway operators. So maybe this is a way to find really a cooperative planning to be able to fulfill all the objectives of we talk about. So
yeah, so that's a
I
role
think
that can have some leadership in the whole and overview of the whole.
It all depends on politics also, that the financing of the project,
Yeah.
and sharing role and responsibilities, not waiting each other. Maybe, of course, it's a little bit tricky to be able to do this. Yeah. But look, public authorities are organizing a discussion, which is good.
Markus, apart from politics and governments, which are easy, of course, to point fingers at.
Well, I guess it's not so much the collaboration between the different industrial parties here at the desk or at the table also. It's more the coordination of that, that everything is, I mean, you want to make a business case at the end out of that, and it doesn't help if I have a nice megawatt charger build up and we have grid access for that, but there is no truck, and the other way around. So you need, when you put the target...
You just need to make a timeline, and then you say, 1st of January, we have all of this.
There needs to be some orchestration on that one.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Otherwise you have always that hand in
But
hand
who needs
thing.
to do that?
I guess there is an obligation from a regulator, at least in terms of target setting towards it, or putting the main directions out. Otherwise, you have a charging infrastructure but no cars, or you have cars and no charging infrastructures, or you're missing the part of the connection there. Yeah. So there need be on the target, and there were good attempts, I would say, in the beginning, but now it's softening a little bit from left and from the right, and so that coordination of setting the direction up is not, well, it's not so sensible anymore.
Okay. Jan, you have something to add?
Yeah, I will not blame politicians again, because that's not the only thing that.
No, but you can. I mean, if it's just the politicians to blame, but I
all
can
do it at home, I guess. So I will not do it on stage again. But I think we have a lot of more collaboration. If we look back 10 years, I think we are much better today in collaboration. Not the least on the charging side, where we have learned so much that it is really about. A lot of energy companies, grid operators, charge point operators, hardware and software providers. So, I mean, this didn't even exist, this kind of collaboration before. So it's a good step forward. Then a little bit closer to my heart as well is also the fact that it's not only for us to sell trucks to somebody, because it's somebody buying the transport as well. And what we are starting to learn is to be much better in selling our products to the ones that are going to buy the transport, because then they are putting requirements on the one doing the transport. So just there is another party not participating in this discussion, which is very important for us then. So we are selling in a different way than we did before. And that is also some kind of collaboration to explain what is possible and what is actually not possible, because any transformation being as big as this sustainable transformation of the transport industry actually means that we need to change. Everything cannot be exactly like it was.
No.
It's not possible to go from here to Spain without refueling.
No.
So you need to change.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to refuel in 10 minutes. Even though we have megawatt charging, etc., it will still take some time. Yeah. So there is a need to change. And I think it's very much about education and planning and thinking a little bit differently. And it's not only one party understanding everything at the same time, but if we have more discussions on how to change, not the big equation, but smaller things to that. I mean, basically, you need to be able to do your operation, you need to make money, but you can maybe little bit compromise on doing the operation in exactly the same way. Maybe not all US trucks needs to do 500 miles with all trucks. Maybe you can have a few that can do the longer operation, and the other can return to base after 200, etc., etc. So it's so much more complicated to do transport in this new and necessary way than.
Yes, now zooming out, if you want to do a real big push with this, and you were the dictator of Europe. Yeah.
We have enough dictators.
Yeah,
these
okay,
days,
sorry. Yeah, it's a weird question for an American right now, but okay. What would you do? I mean, what would be a realistic timeline, and how would you gather around this common goal?
So one thing I would say, I totally agree that so many pieces of the puzzle have to work together, and there's change that happens along that chain, and logistics is complicated.
Yeah.
I think really staying on the path of commitment for everybody counts, meaning governments should stay more close to their commitments and not water them down.
Yeah.
Companies should, producers, manufacturers should also make commitments to production levels and not scale back, including, vehicles and batteries and infrastructure. And if there's disconnects, the education part is important. The one part of stakeholders that's really important in this piece is some of these companies that are involved in the logistics, or what we call the beneficial cargo owner, right? That package or that thing that is moved in those trucks, they also want to go to zero emission, or they are also usually very big companies that are responsible for decreasing their carbon output overall. And they can be enormous drivers in this. But I think putting everybody at the table and really being able to have a point of contact, that when you reach a barrier, that you have who to resolve that barrier with, rather than immediately within your company going, okay, here's a barrier, that's it. That is,
we give up.
That is the part. So I think having champions on all sides of this equation that can really push moving along, rather than, because there's problems all around. Having said that, I want to say that I don't feel we're celebrating the successes enough also. We've done actually a lot, all of us together. So I think we need to focus on some of the success stories that you were showing, and then learn from those, how can they expand and multiply.
Yeah. I'm looking at the iPad with questions. Maybe it's nice to give the audience also some shine. This is a question for Jan. You mentioned the need for the supportive policies and conditions to assist with the TCO. I have no clue what that is, but you probably do.
Total cost of ownership.
How does Volvo Group help the introduction and longevity of these policies and conditions through public messaging and advocacy?
That was a long question.
Yeah.
TCO is total cost of ownership, so it's basically to make sure that it's actually profitable to run clean operation rather than the old dirty one. And we have been working quite a lot internally in the Volvo Group to understand what is, not necessarily saying what if we were the dictators of Europe or any other country, but what is it that we want to advocate for? And what is it that we believe is less important to advocate for when it comes to policies? And it is very much about, for instance, in Europe, there is a directive on how to do CO2 taxation based on how you use, how much time you are on the road, how many kilometers, etc. And it would be a good starting point to implement that directive in all European countries, for instance. It doesn't sound like too much to ask for. So it's one part of that, and then also to make sure that the green electricity is not disqualified versus dirty electricity, which is also based or could be a taxation issue. And we have a lot of things there where we have actually sorted out what do we believe is important. And one thing, as I said as well, what we want to advocate for is also to make sure that the demand is increased, for instance, by starting to say that the big transport buyers, they also need to buy differently. It's not only the OEMs that needs to produce differently. You could have exactly the same CO2 reduction demand for the big transport buyers, for instance. And so we can have a special session on all the things that we would like to advocate for, but we have thought it through, and we are using both executive management when it comes to the Brussels discussion, but also our market companies and the managing directors to do the local discussions in Sweden, in Norway, in Switzerland, in Germany, in Finland, etc., etc., etc.
We've been touching on I just realized something. We're talking about the political side of this, because obviously there's a big political side to this. But can you still say that the transition to electrical vehicles is seen as so much left-wing as it might used to be? After everything that happens around the world with a certain Mr. Musk. I mean, we all speak about how annoying it is that governments go from one policy to a completely reversed policy. But is this volatility still based on this left-right divide? Or are we now at a stage, maybe even thanks to Mr. Musk, that you can't say the green transition is a left-wing hobby anymore?
I think it's not only a green transition, it's also a question of sovereignty. If you depend on gas, on fuel, especially in Europe, maybe it's a problem in the future. So going to electricity is also a way to be more resilient, to construct.
This is the classic French argument. Yeah. Well, that's nice.
That's why we have nuclear plants in France, yes, of course. But
but okay, so that's not a political, but more a geopolitical argument. But it's still a strong argument.
Yes.
But I can imagine had this problem we're having here is solved when this topic becomes apolitical, less political than it might have been perceived in the past. Or am I wrong here?
Well, you should be wrong. I hope you're wrong. It should be.
I also hope I'm wrong,
independent of if
I might
it's left
not be.
or right wing administration or politics and in power, because at the end, that part of conservation should be in interest of whatever political direction.
Yeah, but we all know it's not.
The question is how you're getting there, and there's probably the difference between a more left and a more right government. The one would be trying to target more on these are limits, these are rules, these are probably also incentives. The other one would say, how do I make it a business case?
Yeah.
And at the end, that's also what is well, they should move together, make it the whole thing a business case, and you have the instruments on how you probably make green energy, electrical energy a little bit cheaper, and would that make it a business case for the industry to invest in that? And then you can take it step by step away when the industry is established on the topic, when the infrastructure is built up. But that's what is missing, and I guess it can be there are different angles to it, but it doesn't matter if it's left or right.
Okay. Yes, now.
I think we need to take the politics out of it, actually. I'll give you an example where the green transition has happened, maybe not totally in transportation, but at least in the shift, is the state of Texas with adoption of wind, right? There were no regulations necessarily for pushing them to go in that direction. I think their adoption of wind energy in Texas has, I don't know, it's gone up like enormously, right? And actually in a lot of the central states. And those were not political decisions, those were economic calculations.
Yeah.
Actually, the politics was trying to move it in.
With making a business case out of it.
Right, with making a business case. Exactly, exactly. And I think that is the case. Now, obviously, for something that's been ingrained for so long, right? Use of diesel in trucks and changes there are some challenges in the beginning, early adoption of the market, and the wind energy had the same challenges. The solar adoption had the same challenges. It needs a push, right? It needs a push, but I think we need to take the politics out of it and look at the overall impacts, including the impacts on the environment that figure in the economics.
Yeah. One more question from the audience. A question for you, Delphine. How do you include in your plans that logistic companies will go from a company with almost no energy use to an energy-intensive company? And do you look at the European freight transport corridors? And how do you look, probably, at the European freight transport corridors in this regard? Do you understand the question?
No.
No. So I think what she means, or he, or that this is what this person is saying, that these companies have almost no, I don't know, because they have fossil fuel energy usage. So, stupid question. Yeah, I can't vet the questions. How much does BESS factor into problem solving? I have no clue what BESS is, but you do. Into problem solving grid interconnection problems for truck charging sites.
Well, it's battery storage systems. So when you build in, if you don't have enough energy available or connection or grid connection, that you build in a storage system, and you use that if you have more need, and you probably give the energy back to the grid if there's a need in the grid. So that helps in balancing. It's not well, it doesn't help always. It depends a little bit on the where you install it and where you put it in. So if we talk, for example, on these distribution fleets, where you have the big distribution centers from Amazon in the US, well, they all charge during the night. There's nothing to give back there. Their grid connection need is not so high, but it helps in depots, and helps also in smaller sites where you don't have the enough energy available, that you charge it up in a storage system when energy is available, and then you feed it into your trucks or in your cars. So, is it a massive applicable solution? I wouldn't say at the moment, but it helps in isolated areas to balance it out. At the end, you will have the biggest balancing factor is not a battery storage system; it's the cars and the trucks itself. But that needs when you talk about giving energy from the vehicles back to the grid, that needs an enormous effort on managing that and integrating that. And our grids at the moment are also not prepared for that, probably in a lot of areas. But that would be the normal balancing factor. But at the moment, you build up some storage systems in some depot owners in order to have that.
Yeah. So that little box standing next to you for passenger cars is not feasible in the short term for trucks. You know what it is.
No, that's not. I mean, what you do with that one, and that's on a small, very microgrid level. If you want, you take your own household. You have a battery storage system there. You have an AC charger there. You have some PV on the rooftop, and then you make your own small microgrid and feed. But you don't feed it back to the grid at the moment. You feed your household with that.
Yeah. How does the future look like? We now heard the Swedish numbers for electrical vehicles, passenger cars, which is about, I don't know, 50% or so. When will we be at that level for trucks? How long will this take in the current pace?
In France, we said that in 2030, trucks will be 25% electric. That's what we plan. So,
is that a hard target, or that's just?
It depends, of course, of European policies and targets, of course. But for the grid,
and this is long haul, or this is every truck?
Yeah, every truck. Okay. Yeah, and as I said, 80% of freight is regional. So. Yeah.
There's still a world to win there. Else now?
So, targets are important. So our global Drive to Zero program is focused specifically on commercial truck electrification, and that has a target of 30% by 2030 and 100% by 2040. I invite you, I'm going to pitch here our little panel on Wednesday morning from 8 to 9, where we're talking about examples of the global south actually participating in that. In addition, and there are some of the 40 countries right now that are members of the global MOU of electrification of the truck sector. So focusing on those targets is important. If we want to get to 100% by 2040, we need to reach 30 by 2030. Yeah. So I liked your number. 25 is not too far off there.
Well, I guess it depends if you talk about newly sold trucks then, or if you talk about the installed fleet around the world. Installed fleet around the world will be quite complicated.
Right, sold.
Yeah, but sold, that's doable, and especially if you think it, and we were discussing that a little bit in the beginning, if you don't think of on the last percent always. I mean, the last percent is always the most complicated one. And if you start the discussion from there, well, we never achieve the targets, but the 95% is doable, for sure.
Yeah, our targets remain as well, and it's exactly what we said. We need to be at roughly 30% electrified at 2030, and we have an internal target to be 100% CO2 neutral 2040. Then, with the current pace, it doesn't look so good, but again, some of these parameters in the equation can be changed relatively quickly, because we know that at least we have products that can address 30% of all track operation easily by the end of 2030. So it's theoretically possible, but more has to be done, that's clear.
We will talk more about trucks tomorrow morning, about the business model behind it and how we can make that more attractive. For now, I'd like to thank you all four for your participation. Give them a warm round of applause.